Arratsaldeon, Lehendakari, Ministro de Exteriores.
Good evening, Lehendakari, Secretary of State for the European Union, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Secretary of State for the 2030 Agenda, President of the BBK. Welcome, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. Welcome to all of you to this opening of the Local 2030 Coalition HQ. This is a great day for Spain, for the Basque country, and for Bilbao, because it's thanks to this HQ other countries around the world will be committed to meet the SDGs, and we want to be the driving force for that. If you'd come here 30 years ago, you cannot imagine that this city would become what it is today. Just 20 or 30 years ago, this was a very grey, tough city, and with very little hope for the future of youngsters. But now it's a very colourful place where you've got university knowledge, sustainable mobility, language and social diversity throughout this city. And this transformation has been brought about by many people from different fields, public-private collaboration, where we've had the assistance of the Basque government, the Spanish government, the Bilbao City Council, all together have actually brought us to the Bilbao of today, Basque country of today, and the Spain of today that is preparing us for a future. And yet, we want to go beyond that. We want to take a step further. We are thinking about the goals of 2030, and these goals are to be met all together. And first and foremost, I'm going to hand the floor over to Juan Mari Aburto. When you're ready, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Arratsaldeon guztioi, good evening, buenas tardes.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. President, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Minister, authorities, dear friends, welcome to Bilbao. I'm the Mayor of Bilbao, so for me it's an honor that this event is held here in my city, and it's great to be here with you, and I'm really grateful and also committed to this.
The city of Bilbao. The 31st October 2022 marks a before and an after in our city. As of today, we are the Local 2030 Secretariat of the United Nations, and I am sure that Bilbao will deliver. Bilbao accepts this challenge to be the driving force of values, with commitment, enthusiasm, and pride. Bilbao is a city of values with a capital V, where present and future sustainable development is based on firm values and which define the city with its citizens. Our values and the CDGs are fully aligned, united, and go hand in hand, and one cannot be understood without the other. The City Council is truly committed. We have been incorporating the 2030 agenda into our municipal policies and also into the life of the city, thus sharing it with our citizens. Vivimos desafíos urgentes e importantes.
We're experiencing urgent, imperative challenges that affect the planet, humankind as a whole. And as we can see from the 2030 Agenda of the United Nations, they require collaborative action of everybody, of all stakeholders, to transform social, economic, environmental realities of everybody that lives on this planet. These challenges have faces, names, realities, and we need to do that. Nobody should be left behind. Bearing in mind this situation that affects all of us, the UN wants local governments, and the local governments needs the UN to achieve those aims. This is key to meet the commitment that we have with people globally from a UN level and locally at a city level. That's why Bilbao wanted to be one of the agencies behind promoting this Secretariat, and we're very proud that this is being made possible together with other institutions and organizations, and we'll be guaranteeing it all of our support for many, many years. So in the future, people will look towards Bilbao. Bilbao is a city which is value-based, an inclusive, modern city with citizens and has a great deal of personality, and people feel that they belong to the city. It's a resistant, cohesive society. What's more, we've got a strong network of public and private organizations and entities, and they're innovative and committed, and they've shown to the world that they are able to make joint projects visible in the long term, and their ability to together put them into practice. And the result of this is that an industrial city has become an attractive, competitive city, which we're all able to enjoy today. And we're able to do that through our commitment to sustainable development. Bilbao wants to contribute to the UN agenda, be an agenda that transforms all societies. Once again, we want this agenda to be an agenda that transforms all societies, of course, all our societies, including our territory. We are aware of our commitment to people and the planet. Bilbao is now undergoing a full transformation process to make the 2030 agenda and SDGs key to everything that we do, both in the City Council and throughout the rest of the city. We need to be brave to transform. We need a 360-degree view of our city. And the 2030 agenda can only be achieved if there's full, systemic, dynamic, participatory, multi-stakeholder and collaborative transformation. The 2030 agenda and SDGs will be real if they respond to the needs of people, the real needs of people, especially the most vulnerable in society. So it is vital that the population of Bilbao be aware, active, and protagonists of this 2030 agenda. This requires that we be part of a global effort to localize the 2030 agenda. We're prepared to share what we do with other cities, with other provinces, and we want to learn together to build coexistence and sustainable development models. In Bilbao, we are proud to be the HQ of the efforts of the global community in the localization of the 2030 agenda. And our city is here and can offer you the knowledge and experience of our city, and with the view always to never leaving anybody behind. Thank you very much.
Eskerrik asko, alkate jauna. Decíamos que
Thank you very much, Mr. Alcalde. The work needs to be collaborative and, of course, multi-level, and that's something that the Spanish government has been involved in as well. That's why I would like to ask Ms. Lilith Fistrinke, the Secretary of State for the 2030 agenda, to take the floor. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in Bilbao, which is a place where I have dear friends and family. Miss Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the UN, thanks for being with us this afternoon. Mr. Linda Kari, Mayor of Bilbao, Minister of Overseas Affairs of the European Union Cooperation, Executive Director of UN Habitat and representative of UNPD, and members of civil society, thank you so much for being here and for having invited us here today. Firstly, I'd like to get across to you a very warm welcome from the Ministry of Social Rights and 2030 Agenda, who would like to have been here this afternoon with you. And I call this a celebration because I think we should be proud of the fact that here we are opening the headquarters of this Secretariat of the Local 2030 initiative of the United Nations. And of course, what a better time to do it than the International Cities Day. Everybody knows that over the last 3-4 years, unfortunately, there have been terrible events around the world, pandemics, economic crises as a result of the Ukraine war, high levels of inflation that have never been heard of to date. That is why we feel more than ever this agenda should be our roadmap, a very ambitious one. The Spanish government knows that achieving the 2030 agenda will only be possible if local and regional organizations are on board, and that local and regional governments have a key role to offer certainties and to be at the forefront on many occasions of crisis. The major global challenges that we face need the power of local action. They need proximal local analysis to hand in hand with citizens and their first-hand experience. We need the transformative power of local politics to actually reach the rights and social justice that we want. To do that, we have the Sustainable Development Strategy, which we were thankfully able to put last year at a high political forum of the United Nations. This is the roadmap to accelerate transformations which will allow us to carry on progressing towards this future that we aspire to achieve both here and abroad. Based on this key pillar, which I mentioned earlier, working together, co-governance and dialogue. But what's more, in our country, a lot more has been done, and I'd like to here highlight the local entities, the local authorities network. This local authorities network already has a significant number of local governments who together represent over half the Spanish population, 26.6 million people. So I'd like to say thanks to all of them and for proving that our country is committed to sustainable development. With the opening of the Secretariat, we are taking a huge leap forward and we deepen our commitment to co-governance and to the localization of the 2030 agenda, which will lead to the driving forward of a new funding line for projects in this field. Internationally, and also a shared component by the Spanish government from the Ministry of Social Rights and the 2030 Agenda. We are engaged in this project and we know that this work is going to be key to broaden the goals that the SDGs hope to obtain throughout the whole world and also locally. And I'd like to finish by saying thank you and referring to something that the mayor said. Our initial goal is that the 2030 agenda become specific policies, not just a pipe dream, something that we're aspiring to do, that we can achieve. So thanks once again to everybody for being on board, for being engaged, and for making this initiative possible. There are many challenges ahead of us, and I'm sure that if we make our effort and we work together, we will reach those goals, and we will reach them together. That's how you get things important done. Thank you very much. Eskerrik asko.
Muchas gracias, Secretaria.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. And now we're going to give the floor on behalf of the Spanish government. We're going to give the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the European Union Cooperation, Mr. José Manuel Álvarez. Mr. Minister, you have the floor, sir.
You got it up there?
Buenas tardes. Good
afternoon or good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. Arratsaldeon. And dear Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohamed, dear Len Nakari, Mayor of Bilbao, the Executive Manager of UN Habitat, the representative of the UNDP, Chairman of the Fundación BBK, friends and colleagues. Well, it's wonderful to be here tonight with the rest of the institutions that have been involved in the project, which has to do with the inauguration of the headquarters of the Secretariat of the Local2030 coalition here in Bilbao. And I'm very happy to be in this city because, well, we are holding the 25th anniversary of the inauguration of the Guggenheim Bilbao Museum. A museum that is an absolutely mandatory visit, and I would recommend that to you, dear Deputy Secretary General. It's a reference of contemporary art in Spain and in the rest of the world too. But I would like to now talk a little bit about the visit of Amina Mohamed, who's the Deputy Secretary General. And she's here in Spain together with people representing UN Habitat and the Programme of the United Nations for Development on this day, the International Day of Cities. And her presence here today shows how important our cities are and how important our regions are as regards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And also, this also underscores the role that Spain is playing as a leader in these initiatives. And this is why discussion panels like Act Local to Go Global that are going to take place now are spaces for essential spaces of dialogue so that we can advance in an inclusive development process in which all of us citizens are involved. And the inauguration of these headquarters of the Local2030 Coalition Secretariat takes place in a very complex context in the world, because we're facing many interconnected crises that endanger the achievement of SDGs, unless we make an extraordinary effort starting now. And firstly, we have the pandemic of COVID-19. And more recently, we have the illegal and unfair aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And this is having consequences that affect the daily lives of our citizens, and especially the people that are most vulnerable. So this is why we have to reaffirm more than ever before our commitment towards the people that are suffering more directly from this crisis, so that we can guarantee that the recovery is carried out according to the goals established in Agenda 2030. And it is in this context in which the Secretary General of the United Nations has made an appeal so that we can all advance towards the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Harmony and collaboration between all of the levels of administration is an absolutely crucial element. Not only in the current context, this current crisis that we're experiencing, but always, because we governments have to play an essential role as regards guaranteeing the well-being of our citizens. And then, well, the fact that the Local2030 coalition is going to be based here in Bilbao is proof of the fact that all of the institutions in Spain are deeply committed to this endeavour. And of course we have the Basque government and the Bilbao Town Council. That is, all the institutions in Spain, as well as in our society, are really focused on this agenda, because we are talking about well-being that applies to everybody. And this is also very clear in the case of specific actions, because we are the second donors of the SDG fund, and in which very soon there's going to be a location window which will allow people to carry out projects with the local and regional organizations. And then we have the support and appropriation of Agenda 2030 in the case of the local and regional bodies has opened a space for meetings, for consensus and for cooperation too. That has produced excellent results, and I'm fully convinced that it is only with everybody's help and everybody's collaboration that we will be able to achieve the objectives laid down in Agenda 2030. And this is also a Sustainable Development Goal. It's number 17, in fact, that tells us that we have to establish partnerships in order to be able to achieve these goals that we have established as an international community or as a planet in mankind. Spain is a very clear example of successful decentralized country. We have shown that we are very diverse, and our country is very pluralistic too. And we've shown how important it is for there to be good coordination between administrations in all areas. And we want to provide that experience for Agenda 2030, as we will also do when in only a very few months we will occupy the presidency of the European Union, which will start in the second half of 2023. And, well, one of the informal board meetings, one of those important meetings that's going to be held is going to take place here in the city of Bilbao. So this is why Spain, since the very beginning, has worked with the Local 2030 coalition, because we believe in making progress in an agenda that is built from bottom to top, from the regions and from the local. And the end result of this collaboration brought about a meeting in February 2019. It was a high-level meeting on the location of Agenda 2030. And that's when the Seville commitment was approved. In other words, a political declaration that is an absolute reference nowadays at an international level in this respect, or in this area. But based on the solidity of our experience, and also, well, this high-level meeting that took place on the funding of development in the period of COVID-19, we launched a proposal to establish or to set up an international fund for the location of SDGs and the possibility of Spain hosting or having a territory for local initiatives, for local 2030 initiatives in its territory. And after presenting at the political forum of the month of July, we presented the candidate of Bilbao to have the Secretariat here. We were very happy and very proud to receive confirmation of this in the month of September, because we know that the Secretariat, and today we visited this wonderful building and the floor where all of these operations are going to be going, and I'm sure that it's going to fulfill all of the objectives and it was going to meet all the guidelines of the coalition. I would like to finish by thanking all of those people that have made it possible to make these achievements, because you have demonstrated, thanks to your joint work, many of you people are here tonight, and thanks to your coordination, you've shown that there's a political will and there's also an institutional will of all of the authorities that have been involved, so that the Secretariat and so that the SDGs can carry on being a priority, not only for Spain, but also for the international agenda, which is the most important issue. Because in the world in which we live, recovery in line with SDGs is more necessary than ever. But we are fully convinced that the policies that have to be implemented will not be built on their own, because we'll need a consensus and we'll need everybody's solidarity so that nobody is left lagging behind. Thank you very much, and Midaske. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor ministro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And now I'm going to give the floor to the President of the Basque Country, Íñigo Urkullu Renteria. Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohamed, Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation, Mr. José Manuel Álvarez, the Secretary of State, Restringe, and I would like to also say hello to the Minister Yori Belarra, Administrator of the UNDP, Ahmed Steiner, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Mahmoud Mod Sharif, and dear Mayor of Bilbao, and dear Chairperson of the Basque Parliament and Chairperson of the Fundación BBVA. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Basque Country. Because in the Basque Country, we have a forum to manage the shared governance of Agenda 2030 between Basque institutions and social stakeholders. So this forum, well, we have all of the regional ministers of the Basque government and the three provincial councils, Eudel, as well as the town councils of the three capitals. And we also have the rectors of the universities that are representing, we also have representatives from the third sector and people representing public and private partnerships and representatives of a number of clusters. And it was on October the 25th when we held here in Bilbao the last plenary session of this forum. And during that plenary session, we approved and submitted a declaration on the meaning and importance of opening here in the Basque Country a Secretariat of the Local 2030 Coalition. And the contents of this declaration, well, covered how the Basque institutions welcome these headquarters of Local 2030. And we are now facing a moment of crisis and uncertainty, and many transformations are taking place. Not only that, it's becoming more and more difficult to reach agreements on the challenges related to mankind, and there are also many difficulties to maintain those agreements. So in view of the situation, Agenda 2030, I think, represents a wonderful necessity and a beautiful opportunity, because the agenda is a tool that has international projection, although it's applied at a local basis. It's a very valid tool to further sustainable human and inclusive development. And 3 years ago, in 2019, United Nations made a call for what they called a decade of action. And this call stems from two factors, and that is the development of Agenda 2030 on the part of the governments is important effort and relevant enough, and many of the competencies related to SDGs are in the hand of the sub-state organizations. So that means that the targets, the Sustainable Development Goals, have become increasingly important for the United Nations, and the fact that we have Local 2030 in the Basque Country makes perfect sense now and in the future. We know that the sub-state governments should play a relevant role as regards the governance of Agenda 2030, because their commitment is strategic to improve the balance of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have to fight against poverty, we have to achieve gender equality, we have to provide more education, do something about climate change, take care of the planet, we need to implement inclusive economic growth, we need to have sustainable cities and communities, justice or peace. These are all global and local challenges that we have to address together. And challenges that the effects of the pandemic and that the invasion of Ukraine make even more pressing. The Basque institutions and bodies represented in the Multi-Agent Forum of Social Transition Agenda 2030 would like to welcome the Secretariat of the Local 2030 Coalition, and we'd like to thank you for this decision, the decision taken by the United Nations. And these headquarters, I think, represent a recognition of the work that has been done in the Basque Country in terms of Agenda 2030. And fundamentally, I think that this represents a commitment with regard to the future. And the best way of expressing our welcome here is by reaffirming our commitment with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And we are committed to their location, and we are committed to a multi-level governance and multi-actor or stakeholder governance. And what we want to do is focus on the methodology of whatever is concrete, because Agenda 2030 needs to go from words to facts. And, we would like to welcome Local 2030, and we must reaffirm our commitments of standing in line with the SDGs, and we also want to boost driving projects. And we would like to reaffirm our commitment towards monitoring and evaluating and using shared and comparable indicators, but always without losing sight of the SDGs. We have a commitment to make it known that we have to strengthen the values that Agenda 2030 represents. So we have to criticize ourselves, because the world is not progressing as quickly as it should, because the pandemic and the invasion of Ukraine have made these problems even more severe, and they've made it necessary to adopt solutions, especially as regards sustainable development, because we need more proactivity in specific areas and in specific transformation elements, because we want to achieve sustainable development that is fair, democratic and co-responsible, based on solidarity. And in order to do so, what we have to do is deliver a positive response to the appeal that has been brought about by Agenda 2030. It has to be a positive approach. And this is our welcome, and this is our commitment. Thank you very much.
Eskerrik asko, lehendakari.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Lendakari.
Mina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. After speaking, she has to leave. So, Mrs. Mohammed, please welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Let me appreciate our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our of the European Union, as well as the Cooperation of the Kingdom of Spain, our President of the Basque Government, our Mayor of Bilbao, and also, of course, my colleagues from the ministry, and my sister Memuna Sharif, who is our ED, and our representative from the UN Development Programme, ASG. Where are you, Howlin? As you go. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how many young people there are in the audience, but if they're there, hello. But this is such a pleasure. I was just listening to everyone today as we opened the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat here in Bilbao. We would never imagine in 2015 that this is where we would be doing 2030. And I just want to deeply appreciate the government of Spain and, of course, the Basque region for accepting us here in Bilbao to try to reach what is such an ambitious agenda, not just for Spain, but for the whole world. So from here, we do go from local to global, and thank you for giving us that opportunity, especially on World Cities Day. So happy World Cities Day. This is just one sign of the commitment of transformations that are necessary to make the 2030 agenda a reality, both here and in the rest of the world. And we're very pleased to see so many supporters here in Bilbao online that are celebrating this milestone. In 2021, we sowed the seeds of an initiative that has now blossomed into a strategic network across the UN system and beyond. So while we speak to UN Habitat and we speak to UNDP, there are more than 42 agencies, funds and programs across the UN system and the world that are joining us. We are mobilizing partnerships, and that is about Goal 17, and it's catalyzing inclusive and innovative approaches and inspiring action across the SDGs. It's there to ensure that we don't leave anyone or place behind. So, dear friends, on World City Day, we recognize the importance of cities for individuals, for our communities, and for economies. More than half of the world's people live in urban areas, and by 2050, over 2/3 will do so. Even people who don't live in cities are often immersed in urban culture and affected by urban dynamics. Supporting and reimagining cities and improving urban planning are key to solving some of the world's most pressing challenges. From inclusive public service delivery that is gender responsive, to health and well-being and care systems that work for everyone, to sustainable development that must deliver for people within cities. Many cities are already leading the transition to renewable energy. They're setting net zero targets and building climate resilient infrastructure. And cities account for more than 70% of carbon emissions, meaning that they can make a huge contribution to supporting the transition to renewable energy. As we look forward to the SDG Summit in 2023, we need to take urgent action to restore and accelerate progress in all countries, including the poorest and most vulnerable. The decade of action was done just before we went into COVID. We never knew that we were going to stop the world for 3 years while we tackled a virus. But we do know that we have the power to make a difference. Individually and together, we can contribute to creating equitable, inclusive pathways for sustainable development. Excellencies, I'd like to congratulate Spain on its exemplary resolve and commitment that the President of the Basque region showed us to the SDGs through the Sustainable Development Strategy for 2030. This represents a unique political and social agreement to ensure that post-COVID-19 recovery addresses a social and ecological transition and puts sustainability and human rights at the center of policy and of action. I hope the Local 2030 Secretariat will be able to draw on your experience in leveraging urban processes and unleashing the power of local action. And at the center of that local action should be young people. Public-private partnerships, innovation, and the creative use of new technologies are just some of the approaches that we need. The Local 2030 Coalition will bring together the combined resources of the UN family, enabling the energy, the digital, the green and blue transitions that are needed for sustainable development. Transformative local action will also require finance for long-term investments in statistical capacities, data analysis, research, foresight, development, education, and so much more. But working together, I am confident we will find ways to increase public and private finance and technical support. Together with the UN system, we stand ready to work with you and keep the momentum high. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, one of the key roles of the Local 2030 Secretariat is to amplify this important work to other regions and other cities. This Secretariat must be a platform to exchange and spur innovation in tackling local challenges around the world. I hope that it will become an authoritative voice representing cities in global decision-making, including at the 2023 SDG Summit and the Summit of the Future in 2024. And here we look forward to the leadership in Spain. So my deep gratitude to the government of Spain, the Basque government, the Bilbao City Council and BKK. You've raised the bar for national governments now throughout the world for them to demonstrate their support for local action through your whole of government and whole of society contribution to the Local 2030 Coalition and the Joint SDG Fund. Let me come to an end by congratulating all cities working to achieve the SDGs on World Cities Day. I hope the spirit of collaboration of the Local 2030 Coalition, its Secretariat, its people, the local partners, will help cities around the world to act local that will go global, the theme of this year's World Cities Day. The actions that are taken by cities to create a sustainable world will reverberate globally, and the transformative policies cities pioneer today can catalyze change that will save and improve lives and livelihoods everywhere tomorrow. We count on your ideas, your partnership, your energy, the creative force to advance the 2030 agenda in this decisive UN decade of action. Finally, my thanks to UN Habitat and to UNDP for their role in setting up the Local 2030 Coalition. I can assure you that as I leave Spain, I will be taking the spirit, the idea, the inspiration of this Bilbao Local 2030 to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mohammed. Jarraituko dugu, Nazio Batuen.
Okay, well, let's continue now, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're going to continue now with this opening session of the local coalition. So it's today the World Day of Cities. So this is why I'd like to underscore that the town councils and the local entities are implementing policies and initiatives. And I know that all of us people can learn a lot as regards achieving the SDGs. Well, yes, we're having an exchange of experiences here, and we have a dialogue involving different parties. So now what we're going to do, we're going to have a panel discussion, and it's going to be people from different areas that are going to be talking about their experiences so that we can make our cities much safer places, much more inclusive and sustainable places.
Dr. Shipra Naranjuri, Chief of Urban Practices Branch at UN Habitat. And speaking on this panel are Mrs. Clara Arpa, CEO of ARPA, member of the United Nations Global Compact Board and President of the UN Global Compact Spain, Mrs. Adrienne Unciaga, Director of BBK Cuna, Mrs. Filomena Ruggiero, Vice President of the Sustainable Development Council, and Raka Elin Arnadottir, Director of the OECD Development Center. Thank you all. Thank you all, and please proceed.
Thank you very much. Does this work? Everything's okay? Great. Thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure, real honor to be here after those inspiring words in the opening segment, the keynote. Alcalde, thank you. Linda Curry, who was here, the minister, and of course the DSG, the executive director, and our colleagues from UNDP, ESG, Haoliang. Colleagues, it's an absolute honor to be doing this today and to be having this conversation. The DSG just talked about the Decade of Action in 2020, which was launched to accelerate progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. We were not on track at that time, and we are not on track today, obviously, after 3 years of the pandemic and amplifying global crises all over the world. In 2021, the Secretary General launched his report called Our Common Agenda. And within that, he clearly recognized that cities and local authorities are key actors in advancing sustainable development and inclusive multilateralism. This really is the principle that is driving the conversations around localization of the Sustainable Development Goals. We've heard a lot about Spain today, and we know that the Spanish example, the Spanish experience, and the commitment of Spain is truly inspiring in terms of not just embracing the Sustainable Development Goals, but putting in place structures, institutional structures, mechanisms, coordinating strategies that are cut across different sectors, a commitment to multi-sectoral approaches to reaching the SDGs, and multi-level governance. And that is, to us, really the example, as many have said, that sets the bar for the rest of the world. Of course, we are here in the Basque Country and the city of Bilbao. The city is an example of what can be done to turn around economies, societies, public spaces, housing, urban environments. And the Basque Country has incorporated the SDGs into transversal strategies across different sectors. So really, we're looking at a range of measures and a range of actions. And this is what we mean by SDG localization, that you have policies, you have actions that transform the SDGs into reality at the local level, keeping in mind global principles, but very much responding to local realities, to local needs. That is really the drive towards SDG localization that we're talking about. We will now have a discussion with a range of stakeholders that are driving the conversation in different ways. We will have, as have already been introduced, this is a powerhouse panel of 4 women, and it gives me great pleasure to moderate this conversation on behalf of UN Habitat. Clara, we'll start with you, maybe.
Okay.
The finance question is always the most difficult one, so let's start from there. Instead of it coming from at the end, let's start with the discussion around finance. You lead a whole, you're CEO of a large group of companies. You're also part of the Global Compact Board. You're chair of the Global Compact here in Spain. And I'm sure you've done a lot of thinking on how the private sector can bring innovation and drive to the achievement of the global goals. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me this afternoon here. And Bilbao, congratulations in order to get the hostage of the Secretariat. Well, this is a difficult question, but at the other side, I think that we have to do things difficult into easy manners. Okay, I think the local and regional governments are those that are closer to the citizen. Even mostly the companies around the world are SMEs, small and medium companies. So these 2 governments are really the closer to this private sector. So we have to push the change. When I mean change, that we have to change everything. Because during the last 70 years, we have been developing in an incredible way. Before these 70 years in the human history, there is no huge change that in the last 70 days. But we have collateral hazards, okay, that we didn't complete it before. So we have to change first how we manage, how we produce, and how we consume. First, like individuals, and then like companies, okay? So if we can make this in another mindset aspect, we will be great. So we have to finance this change. So we have to, in my pure opinion, we have to do 2 things. First, innovation. Innovation. We have to change so many things, and we need innovation, and we need digitalization, and we need to retraining all that people that in that moment we are used to do things and standard manners. But all those people, if we don't want to be behind, we have to finance, training, education, and we have to think all this change, just thinking in sustainable development. That's one important thing, how we can finance disruptive innovation, and the second one, how we can finance the training and the education that we have to get in that moment, not only in the social aspect, also in the STEM careers. And we have to wake up the vocation in women and girls in order to get at least that the half of the talent of the world could be accomplished the other 50%.
Fantastic. No, this is very important. Financing for reskilling, for training, for capacity building, and financing for digitalization. Both are important. We keep thinking that it's only the finance we need for, the big finance we need for infrastructure, but we miss the point that we need financing for institution building, for societal building that you're talking about, with a focus on women and girls. Ider, does this resonate with you? You come from a private philanthropic foundation, and a big thanks to BBK for being here and for supporting this this whole of society approach towards SDG localization and Local 2030. Does this resonate with you? Is this what foundations are also looking at in terms of driving the localization agendas, or are there other levers that you're looking at?
Well, thank you, Shipra, and thank you, everyone. Well, indeed, that's the work that from BBK, that's exactly what we are trying to do. And I just wanted to share the example of BBK Cuna, the House of the SDGs, today with everyone, because we think it's a great example of how to act local to go global, right? We work within the House of the SDGs with all stakeholders. So we work with private companies, we work with the public administration, with research centers and universities, and we work with the citizens as well, and we put them all together in order to find solutions to the challenges that we have. But first of all, we localize those challenges. We have the support of the BBK Studies Department. We work with our think tank. It's a group of experts in different areas of knowledge. And we also add the voices of the neighborhood, of the citizens. So once we have those challenges localized to our reality, we try to find solutions that are inclusive, holistic, and heterogeneous. And we are talking about issues such as unwanted solitudeness, menstrual poverty, how the climate change is affecting the Basque country. We are talking about real issues that affect all of us on a day-to-day basis, right? And just let me just share a very quick example on how, on one of our initiatives, because, you know, we do projects from research action, we do learning communities, we do creation of networks, etc. But we work with people as well. So if you all go upstairs afterwards to the main floor, you will find a mural that we organized on the occasion of the World Cities Day. And we wanted to bring the voice of the citizens to this presentation of the Secretariat. So the voices that you will find there are the voices of Said and Samira and Waldo and Juanjo. Those are examples of some students who came to the House of the SDGs last week and with whom we had the chance to work on how to incorporate the SDGs on their center, which is, I have to say, a very special center because they work with minors who arrived to the Spanish state also, and unaccompanied minors. So those voices have to be incorporated. I think that our work from BBK and from all institutions is to give a voice to all of them, from big companies who can make a huge change through the changing of their governance models, to the voice of people who have names and last names and can share their life experiences and their vision on how to achieve the agenda by 2030.
Phenomenal. So shifting the discussion from an abstract conversation to real people with real names, with real problems. And it's amazing that you can have a conversation on a range of issues from menstrual poverty to climate impacts. and all of them impact people's daily lives. So that's very interesting, but also very challenging, in terms of bringing together young people, citizens, stakeholders, with private companies, with the government, and somehow help them speak the same language, communicate to each other in the same way. Maybe Philomena, you will pick up on this because, as the Vice President of the Sustainable Development Council, as a gender expert, and we just heard examples around women's issues, challenges, and engagement in sustainable development. How can this stakeholder engagement that IDER is also talking about help influence public policy making at the local level? How do you facilitate that process?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for inviting us. I'm speaking about us in plural because I think that we are us. And if you don't mind, I don't know if it's possible to speak in Spanish.
Yeah? Yes.
No, it is.
Yes.
No, but for me, I elaborate the intervention in Spanish, but I can speak English as well. But it's okay for you.
It's possible.
Thanks a lot. Ante todo, felicidades.
I'd like to say congratulations, firstly, to the Basque government, the Spanish government, and of course, cordial greetings to the UN and the public-private institutions that are here with this. I started out saying that we are women because we represent the civil society in the Sustainable Development Council. And we need to remember that civil society, organized, diverse civil society, has a constructive participation in all the debate to build the UN agenda in September 2015. So we need to think about how at that time a series of coordinates were highlighted regarding the democratic requirements of our time, which includes social justice, fairness, and care of the planet. Undoubtedly, we feel that today's civil society has accepted the challenges of this transformative agenda, and its role is going to be crucial for this to be viable at all levels. Within the established frameworks of civil society, I'm just going to comment some of them. These roles are not exclusive and are shared with other stakeholders in a complete cycle of planning, monitoring, assessment of public policy that contribute to the territorialization of the 2030 agenda. This coalition, we feel, is really important. I personally put this into practice in our daily work, actually, because if we have these direct relations and they're always participatory at different levels and they're multi-stakeholder and together with all of our colleagues. The second thing that I wanted to mention is how important diverse civil society participation is. At a time of crisis, it's so important to overcome social exclusion based on gender, race, sexual identity, or class. And this can only be done if we take an interventionist approach and if we have the active participation of everybody, but specifically of women. And I can say that here because I'm a representative of many women, and there are many forms of this oppression. That's why our importance in being here today. That's why it's important to have our presence here, to be coordinated, to work together with the rest of society, which is men, and and I'm not talking here about just a society that only has binary representation, far from it. And how important, I'd like to end by talking about the localization of the 2030 agenda. That really is key. It's so important that this localization be at the heart of the 2030 agenda, so that life and dignified, decent life is right at the heart of everything at all times. Thank you.
Life, dignity, that's very much part of underpinning, I wouldn't say part of, the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me turn, last but not least, to you, Ragnhildur. You are the director of the OECD Development Center. Let's zoom out a little bit and look at the role of an international actor, a multilateral organization such as the OECD. You've heard from the private sector, you've heard from philanthropies, you've heard from civil society, we've heard from local governments throughout the day. What support can OECD provide, or is OECD providing, to ensure that cities and local actors and local communities are empowered and equipped to localize the SDGs? What should we be focusing on?
Well, there are several issues, and I think the combination or the composition of the panel shows, and the actors that have been speaking here today shows the volume of the task. This is something that nobody can do alone. So we have to make sure that we pool our resources and cooperate. And first, I would like to thank for the honor of being in such a distinguished group, and especially with you, Sibra. I hope I pronounced your name right. Who I was told before I came here that you have the title of being a good friend of the OECD Development Center. So that is a title that is a lot of people aspire to, I would say. But just to address the question on how we can support local authorities and how we can sort of in their efforts make sure that we support them, I want to point to three priority actions. And I'm going to just mention them briefly and touch upon them, and then go into describe a project that you're familiar with, that is a sort of a test case of cooperation. First, if we look at the priorities, we need to give voice to the local communities, and especially the local actors from the developing countries. Second, we need to strengthen their capacity to deliver services for their citizens, to help them help themselves. Yeah. And we spoke about finance. Third priority is to work together to ensure and enhance their ability to finance the policies. And like I said, I would like to touch upon why these three policy or three priorities are so important. And as I mentioned, I want to touch briefly on the G20 initiative, a very important G20 initiative that we have been working with UN Habitat and jointly supporting, which relates to cities and particularly relevant set of cities, intermediate cities. It's an initiative that we at the Development Center, as I said, have been working with UN Habitat, but also several other partners that are here today. But going back to the three key priorities that have emerged from the analysis that we have been doing in the recent years, and from discussions with governments, local authorities, from G20 countries, OECD countries, and the developing countries. And if we go back to the first one, the issue of voice and representation, there is a pressing need to strengthen the voices of local actors, and we are all here today, and we know that the importance of that, especially in developing countries, and we have to engage with them more systematically in the international development debate. And this is of course true in general, but it's particularly the case for the cities that I mentioned, the intermediate cities, which are medium-sized cities, sort of agglomerations in many respects like Bilbao, and they play a critical role in the development process of every country by connecting the rural and the metropolitan areas. The DSG talked about the importance of cities leading and driving the development, for example, in the energy transition. And these cities are an integral part of that development. And in many developing countries, these cities are oftentimes overlooked, and they're not included in the national development strategies, and they're also underrepresented in the international fora. And the lack of voice and lack of representation of these intermediate cities makes it harder for national governments and for the international community to understand the potential and to address their needs. And the second priority, the enhancing the local capacity, or reinforcing it rather, more needs to be done to strengthen the capacity at the city level to plan and manage development process. And better capacity is necessary for more effective policies, including the management of natural resources and the response to climate change. And I can give an example. We have been working with the mayor of the city of Quilimane in Mozambique, who's working to develop a mobility plan to address climate change and make his city more livable. But the biggest challenges that he is facing today is the lack of human resources in his town hall, in his city hall, to move this project forward. So we need to enhance the local capacity. And the third priority, and going back to the finance, we must engage with these cities to enhance their access to resources in order to be able to finance the development and the policies. And the intermediary cities, they are in fact disproportionately affected by limited private investment. Again, they have a smaller fiscal base, and they depend on transfers a lot of times from the central government, and this goes back to the lack of voice and lack of capacity. So it's a vicious circle, and also because, as the mayor in the example that I said before, there's also a lack of capacity of people who are who can prepare bankable projects and know the tricks of the trade in the financing world. So what is the OECD doing? What can we do to further this along? And as I mentioned, ever since 2018, the OECD Development Center and UN Habitat formed sort of a strategic alliance to investigate the roles of these intermediate cities in particular for development. And this alliance, I must say, was an important factor to sort of raise awareness, for example, among the G20 and get this on the radar and the attention of or sort of the attention of SDG localization, get the attention of the G20 to realize that. And in 2021, the G20 leaders recognized that intermediate cities have a great potential for sustainable development. And they also recognized that these cities face oftentimes multiple constraints, as I've been discussing, and they lack voice, capacity, financial resources, especially in the developing countries. And so we are therefore very pleased, we're very pleased when the G20 leaders decided to work closer with intermediate cities and launched a platform, the platform for SDG localization and intermediary cities, or like every program with a good acronym, the G20 PLIC. And this was launched in Rome last year. And the PLIC is an inclusive place for policy dialogue, to expand knowledge and to develop partnerships, to support local, national and international actions localized development. So we've like I said, come a full circle, and it ultimately aims to build a more prosperous future for the people who live in these cities, and of course beyond. So the platform, in my view, and for us at the development center, is a crucial tool to localize the SDG, and in it has the same objective as the Local 2030. Found this on the web. Siri. So just to conclude, we just hope, and we see a lot of ways for this to work together and collaborate, and I look forward to seeing how we can explore that in the future, to try to see it take off in a more powerful way, even by cooperating.
Thanks very much. And I think you've led us to the point where you already started touching upon how the G20 platform and OECD's other ongoing work can connect much more to the Local 2030, and there can be a synergetic relationship. Perhaps this is a question also to the others. And Clara, how can the Local 2030 coalition support your work? And I say your work in a very broad sense, both in terms of running a private, group of companies, but also from a zoomed out view of the global compact and the private sector more broadly. How can we connect Local 2030 to amplify and support your work?
Well, I think that we need at the end to promote transparency and accountability on the locals. And I think the coalition can help, of course, in terms of capability to reach the smallest locals, the smallest centers. That is difficult, for example, in places like Spain, because we have spread the territory and we have so much lack of population, and we are complete of small villages that need to have a strong support in that way. I think that is that one, and in the other is how can be the agenda applied in a small local, with papers, with training, as we have in the global compact, the compass, right? Something similar that is support them, because sometimes locals come to global compact advising us that they need help in order to understand and to implement the agenda. I think that Beverly, what I think that can help the coalition, how we can engage this way to do it.
So big piece is advocacy, raising awareness, reaching not only intermediary cities, but the smallest ones, the remote ones, basically engaging them in a discussion around SDGs, and also making the point that SDGs are not an add-on to their daily work. They're very much the flip side of what they do every day, providing water, sanitation, electricity, building roads, building housing. These are the SDGs, right? But very often, smaller local governments do not have the capacity to absorb that, to understand that, and to act on it and connect it to the SDGs. So that's I think, a very big piece. And I think the capability question is coming back again and again, the capacity question. How can we work better with foundations? How can the Local 2030 Coalition support what you're doing already, for example, with the community you talked about, the House of Sustainable Development here? How can we help?
Well, what I believe is that as foundations, and in our case, Bebeka, we are very close to the citizens. So I think that the Local 2030 Secretariat will be a great opportunity for us to learn from others and to exchange practices. All these citizens hubs all around the world, I'm sure they are already developing solutions to the challenges that could be either replicated or scaled up, and the other way around, because what we are doing here is we are developing all those answers to the challenges that we have, and we try to get solutions that can be also scaled up. So it could be a both-way relationship. And not only that, of course, the visibility that, well, having such a secretariat in Bilbao, in the Basque country, it will give us a big push, both outside the Basque country, Europe, and in the world, but also inside. It gives us credibility for the work we are doing here. And it gives us another reason for our citizens and our companies and our organizations to engage. And for those who are working, it's a great, let's say, it's a great recognition for what everyone is doing in the Basque country. But for those who are not engaged yet, I think it's a great initiative for them to start doing it. So yeah, it's a win-win situation for everyone.
I think so. And I think this idea that we bring global best practices to local realities and take from local realities good practices and amplify them and share them globally. And that's really the idea of a coalition like this. Remember that the coalition also has, is accompanied by at least 15 UN actors, agencies, funds, offices, programs, regional commissions. So we're really looking at the opportunity of harnessing all these experiences and mainstreaming them through the UN system.
Yes.
And its presence on the ground, and international actors such as OECD, to reach many more cities, countries, and regions. Civil society actors such as yours, the Sustainable Development Council and other NGOs and civil society organizations and networks that you're involved in, Philomena.
Yeah.
How do we help you? How do we work with you?
Yeah, I'm going to speak in Spanish.
Please.
No, I'm so sorry because
Linguistic
the only one
diversity is very important.
I would like to speak also in euskera, but I can't.
Well, I think that one of the most important challenges has to do with communication. So, in other words, how can we communicate with our citizens? And how can we try to establish a link between what is local and global, so that people on the streets, in other words, so that my neighbor or somebody that has a shop or somebody that looks after my children or my mother, for instance, how can we engage all of those people? Or somebody that cleans our room at the hotel, and so that all of these people can form part of this process. I believe that that is one of the fundamental things. We have to simplify things, and we have to communicate. And above all, what we have to do is try to keep everybody posted on what's going on, engage them in the process, because they also have to form part of the center of the process. And how this process from going global to something that is territorial can change their lives. And this is, I think, our challenge, the challenge for civil society. So I think that we are providing a link with all of our citizens, and how our analysis and our proposal and how our capabilities can address all of these, what I would call needs, needs that have not been met, because there are many, many needs that have not been met yet. But how to do this, and how can we serve as a link, too, with the local authorities and with the state or government authorities, so that all of this can be reflected through laws and regulations that will then have an impact on the lives of people. But what we believe, basically, is that, well, we as women too, because many times it's something that we have had experience with. For instance, at the hotel where I'm staying, the person that was cleaning the room was a woman, of course. And the person that looks after my mother is also a woman. So I think that the most important jobs we're doing for the sustainability of life without forgetting about the important roles that is played by women, but it's mainly women that are playing these very, very crucial roles. So therefore, I think that it's a crucial challenge. Everybody agree with this, if I'm not mistaken. And let's only hope that we will be able to meet all of these needs that perhaps have not yet been fully covered or properly covered. Thank you very much for the question, by the way.
To the top, really, a notion and an idea of caring cities that a lot of local governments, UCLG is somewhere in the room. Emilia Sais couldn't be with us today, but her message is with us. And I think the whole idea of caring cities and building cities around a caring, also a caring principle, but also the care economy.
Yeah.
Very big part of a very big piece in achieving the sustainable development goals, and we can't ignore it. But I want to go back to perhaps a quick set of takeaways that I've heard from you so far, and you will tell me if I'm missing anything. One is that it's not localization of SDGs is not really just about projects. Projects. No, we need projects, and cities need projects, and they need physical intervention. But it's about policies, it's about regulations, it's about access to finance, it's about governance, it's about institutional structures, and it's about capacities, ultimately. So that's one big piece that we're looking at in terms of what it means to localize the SDGs. The second thing that I haven't heard much today, but I know OECD works a lot on this, and so does the Global Compact, which is the question around data and indicators. This is another piece that hopefully the Local 2030 Coalition can help drive forward, not generate new data necessarily, but bring together data that empowers local actors to take the right decisions and go on that track of policy priorities, etc. The third is financing, of course. Big part of the story is not just about, the fundamental pieces. Yes, we need money to do projects, but we need to enhance access to finance for local and regional governments, which they don't have. Money doesn't often reach the lowest levels of government. It doesn't reach the communities that need it the most. And therefore, creating the structures, bankable projects, but also absorption capacity to actually access finance, capacities to write good proposals and reach, the big financing actors, is very often missing. So we're really looking at the Local 2030 as a mechanism, a platform to do advocacy, communications you talked about, to do monitoring and support monitoring, more data, more engagement around that data for evidence-based policy making, and then enhancing access to finance. All of that underpinned by the stakeholder engagement that you talked about, bringing in diverse voices, bringing in diverse views, but also underpinned by multi-level governance that we talked about before, policy coherence between local, regional, and national with global is very important and often missing. It's a tall agenda for the Local 2030 Coalition, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are setting ourselves to a very big challenge. Yeah. With your support and with the engagement of a very diverse group of champions, I hope we will be able to take this forward. But at this note, I think I'd like to close it here. And thank you all very, very much for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shita.
Gracias.
Women power on this panel, no doubt about it. Thank you very much, Clara Arpa, Eider Inunciaga, Filomena Ruggiero, Elin Rakelin Arnatotir. Good? Very good. It's my first time in Icelandic. I'm happy. And Dr. Shipra Naranshuri. Thank you. Acabamos de escuchar diversas ideas, diversos...
Okay, we've just listened to people talking about different approaches and experiences that will allow us to address these objectives, these SDGs, so that we can make our cities and countries friendly places where to live. So everybody in Spain wants to deploy these examples all over the world, as we said at this point in time, now that we are having one crisis after another. And at this point in time, when all of these crises are different too. Well, firstly, we had a pandemic, and this was followed by war in the middle of Europe, when we believed that we wouldn't have this experience again. And now we also have a scarcity of energy, and then we have climate change in the epicenter. So something has to be done, and it has to be done very quickly too. So let's continue now with more contributions. And now it's Pilar Cancela, the Secretary of State for International Cooperation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union, and Cooperation of the Spanish government. So please go ahead, Mrs. Cancela.
Pues muchísimas gracias a todos.
Well, thank you very much to everybody, above all because you're still here in the room, which shows the level of commitment you have in relation to cooperation to development SDGs. And the truth is that this is really turning out to be a beautiful event, and this is something that we've seen in the many languages we are speaking. I want to make my own contribution by saying boa tarde in Galician. So it's a great honor and a pleasure to be here in the Basque country, but I would like to say hello, even though she's not present, the Vice Secretary General for the United Nations. But I would like to thank her. I'd like to thank the Deputy Secretary General for coming here, for coming to Spain, for attending this event, and for having prioritized this event, because it's very important for us, and also many thanks for her support. It has been fundamental. There are other projects in other countries that were also submitting projects, and this is the project that they have chosen. So thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you very much, dear President of the Basque country, for your leadership, because the Basque country, let's face it, is well known because of how it's always focused on international cooperation for development. It's an example, and we know what you're doing is known all over the world. So we are working in many projects and many actions with you. So thank you very much for your leadership and for this effort. And thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for having welcomed us to this beautiful city, a pioneer city. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. It's a thriving place, and it's always lovely to be in Bilbao. And many thanks to the Executive Director of UN Habitat. Thank you, Mayumuna. Many thanks to the representative of PNUD, well, you're over here, or UNDP rather. Thank you very much for actively listening, and also many thanks for understanding these projects so that we can all walk together. And dear Secretary of State for Agenda 2030, this is a project that both of us, Secretary of State, started with the Basque government and with the city of Bilbao. And I think that, well, we've just started and there's lots of work to be done, so we'll carry on making an effort. And I would like to say hello to the chairman of the BBK Foundation and to the rest of the authorities. I've been told that we had the president of the Basque Parliament here, so it's great to say hello to you today. And also, I mustn't forget to say hello to the Regional Minister of Labour, Idoia. It's wonderful to see you here this evening, and it's great to have the rest of the audience here with us too. It's beautiful to be here discussing the Local 2030 Coalition Secretary. The building is great, and the sixth floor is absolutely wonderful. So I think that it's been a beautiful move. Congratulations on this work. And the truth is that it's great to be able to participate in such an ambitious and fantastic project, and to see this become a tangible reality. One thing is the design, and we were discussing it and designing it, but now it's a completely different kettle of fish when things are done, when they materialize. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think that we're on the right path. And along this path of construction and dialogue, we'll be meeting up again. But if you will allow me, I would like to focus on one word, which is dialogue. In other words, the possibility of understanding each other, the possibility of actively listening to other people and then build upon that. And that's what we have done. In fact, we submitted a project that had to be debated and where there were different points of view at certain points in time. But in any case, we overcame all of the problems because we had a joint goal. And the joint goal was to implement a certain model of what we believe is cooperation to development and a way of working. Because Spanish cooperation, when I say Spanish cooperation, I'm talking about Spanish cooperation at all levels and in all territorial fields, is known all over the world because of an identity sign in those countries in which we are present, and that is that we have a permanent dialogue capacity and we can construct it together with our partner countries. We've been able to reach agreements and then put down in writing what we were going to do. Our targets are very important, but what is more important are the targets of the countries we are working with. And that's what this is all about. It's never about imposing. It's not about supervising what other people are doing. It's all about getting things done together. And this is the sign of identity of our cooperation that can be seen in each and every one of the cooperative actions that can be carried out from a local and regional and national perspective. And I think that that is a very positive fact. The fact that we listen to people and that we also know how to build things. This, I believe, is the most important element and which I would like to dwell on, and especially the strength that arises from working together without imposing anything on anybody and without trying to cover more space than others, because sometimes the theories prevent us from implementing ideas and products in practice, but this is certainly not the case. So this is why we should congratulate ourselves, and this is what has made it possible for the United Nations to take this project into account vis-à-vis other projects that were being submitted by European Union countries, because, well, there is consistency and there is solidity in the work that is covered by this project. I think that seeing it here live, seeing the building and the infrastructures are very important, but let's say that the most important thing is what we can build together. And I think that we know what we want, as the song says. We know perfectly well what it is we want, so that's why it's easy to understand each other. That's why it's easy to hold a dialogue. So firstly, I would like to underscore this dialogue capacity and this active listening so that we can build things. And that's what we're doing. And please allow me to put in a commercial here. It's only 1 minute. And right now, we are now reforming the Spanish corporation system. We have now a bill that is being discussed by Parliament, and it's the same spirit. It's something that we have built together. This reform of the system has gone from the bottom to the top, and we've tried to hold a very extensive dialogue, and we know that there's going to be recognition, and this is what it really deserves. And we know that decentralized cooperation is one of the key elements. That is what the regions are doing and what the local authorities are doing too. So this is one of our signs of identity. So we cannot forget what is real and what defines us, and also what makes us different in the world. This is another element that is very important. There are always strengths and never weaknesses. And this is how I think we should address this subject. I found that the panel discussion was extremely interesting now, the panel we had just before this part of the event that remains. This is not the most important thing, although some tremendously relevant issues have been raised here by the different people involved, and especially on such a special day like today, the Day of Cities, the World Day of Cities, and we've spoken about pluralism, we've spoken about solidity, and everything helps because diversity helps, and so do the different points of view help. And this is what gives us the potential we currently have. And obviously, well, having the local network of Agenda 2030 is very important. The Council for Sustainable Development, the BBK Foundation, the private sector, academia, the OECD, and who really evaluates us and examines us, who tells us about our potentialities, and also helps us detect those things that we have to improve, fortunately, and and many thanks to UN Habitat too for this tremendous opportunity, for this recognition. And I dare say that this also has to do because it's a path that is opening up in front of us, and we are now walking down that path, and I think that we're going to continue along it together. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for this tremendous opportunity for our country and for the different actors involved in this project. It's true that everybody has said, well, practically everybody mentioned this, it's a very complex point in time. When we were overcoming the pandemic, well, I think that the post-pandemic phase has to be analysed with caution. And right now we are facing an energy, food and financial crisis. And this means that it's something that we learned about in the past, and that is that we are not going to be able to get things done on our own. We're not going to be able to overcome these global challenges unless we bring together our synergies and unless we put our focus on a multilateral approach. So first, let's reinforce our tools internally, but let's also be aware of the fact that we have to be realistic when the time comes to thinking that we cannot get things done on our own. We cannot address these tremendous challenges on our own. So there are people that are trying to weaken multilateralism, but multilateralism has to be reinforced more and more. It's absolutely essential to do this, and I think that in this regard, this project serves as an example of what our joint approach would be like. And what we're talking about a territorial approach and a local approach too. That has to do with the regions, and we are also including, well, let's say, a more generic sphere that has to do with the general state administration, but the local issues have become global.
That's the whole truth, because it's local that's closest to us as individuals. In fact, that was mentioned during the panel's conversation. So I think we're concentrating in the appropriate place, and we're making the efforts where they're needed. Somebody spoke about resources, about budgets. It's budget time of year. I think we're all in our different departments defending our budgets. And in fact, there's very little that can be done in politics if you've got no budget. And that requires political will. And political will is shown by offering finance, as we're doing it, joining forces to achieve joint goals. It goes beyond our territories. These are things that go beyond the local neighborhood, because it's our obligation. When people talk about the 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals, don't forget that the first one is to fight poverty, to eradicate poverty. That's what we're fighting for. We want to eradicate poverty and fight against vulnerability. We can talk about equality. We can talk about the fight for gender equality, the fight against violence. We can talk about green transitions, human rights, democratization, the need to reform institutions. We can talk about a lot of things, but the first thing we need to do is to eradicate poverty. If there's no poverty, everything will be a lot easier, I'm sure. I'm going to end on that note because I don't want to go on for much longer. Just to repeat, we've taken a huge leap forward. We should recognize that. We should showcase this political stride that we've taken forward. But we've only just begun. So see you along the road, and let's cooperate.
Secretary de Estado, non pense que...
Secretary of State, I didn't know you were Galician, and you could speak Galician. We are coming to the very, very end of this event. And to conclude, we've got Joran Fernandez, Secretary General, Social Transition and 2030 Agenda from the Basque Government. When you're ready.
Lehendakari, Nazio Batuetako ordezkariak.
Mr. Lehendakari, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Mayor, regional representatives, a good evening. And very briefly, I should like to defend what I'm going to say with two ideas. First, I'd like to say that this idea is it's time to move on to action. And secondly, we need governance structures that assist everybody and also assist in the development of SDGs and the incorporation of these SDGs in public policies. Our experience means that I'm going to suggest that 5 infrastructures be created so that we can do what we do in specific areas. So it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty. The 2030 agenda needs infrastructures that gets us to our SDGs. And I'm going to mention 5 of them. Firstly, we need in all different government levels, organizations and management areas in 2030 agenda. The Basque government has created a General Secretariat for social transition in the 2030 agenda. Secondly, we need strategic planning documents that last a whole government period, that define principles, goals, and an action plan. The Basque government has a Basque program for Agenda 2030 priorities. Thirdly, the third infrastructure are dashboards with indicators. Ever since 2017, the Basque government has prepared 5 reports that it's presented to the United Nations. Fourthly, you need multi-level governance fora that make it possible to get all institutional levels engaged and all economic and social partners. In the Basque Country, we've set up the multi-stakeholder forum of social transition and the 2030 agenda. And the 5th one is to have social dissemination programs so that these SDGs can be shared with society and their importance and usefulness highlighted. In any case, that's not sufficient. We need to do a lot more. We need to disseminate and get information about there. In our case, these 5 infrastructures and fantastic collaboration between all institutional levels is being very useful. These kinds of experience of what we're going to be offering the Local 2030 Secretariat. And I'm going to say, the 2030 agenda runs the risk of just getting lost in a labyrinth, in a maze of abstraction. The Basque government has the firm volunteer for self-rule and is firmly committed to the 2030 agenda. And thanks to this double decision, I'd like to ask for more, greater, significant participation of sub-state governments. That's what we need if we're going to accelerate the SDGs, compliance with the SDGs, and also to comply with this Decade for Action. Thank you very much.
And now we also have the statements that we have received from the members of the Coalition Steering Committee, the board members of the United Nations, and the local 2030 hubs.
Congratulations on the opening of the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat. This is an amazing milestone because it really reinforces our commitment as those at the local level, the cities, the local authorities, to work together with other stakeholders in our bid to drive forward the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals.
Greetings. My name is Esther from Kenya, and a steering committee member, a young person, and a disaster risk management professional. I'm deeply concerned by the climate change that is affecting our communities by deepening the existing vulnerabilities and creating new ones. At the same time, I'm happy that today we are launching our Secretariat office in Bilbao that will support and strengthen our work at the steering committee for localization of the SDGs. I'm wishing you and us and everyone a great success as we start this journey.
Dear colleagues, reaching the promise of the 2030 agenda is impossible without the local action, which means making our agri-food system more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. FAO, as a member of the coalition, and the future co-chair in 2024-2025 will contribute through its expertise of FAO Office of SDGs, the first in the US system, the FAO Green City Initiative, and our Able Agri-Food System Program. I'm confident that the support of government Spain and the city of Bilbao as a host of Secretariat will contribute positively to the coalition's success. As we celebrate World Cities Day, I wish you productive work ahead with impactful outcomes. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome the opening of the Local 2030 Global Coalition Secretariat in Bilbao, Spain. This is an important occasion to draw attention to the centrality of local actions to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2020, ESCAP, along with the Penang Platform for Sustainable Urbanization members, was the first regional commission to issue regional guidelines for voluntary local reviews, or VLRs. We are pleased that cities in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Nepal, and Thailand have since undertaken VLRs, and many more are working to localize the SDGs. Working with the Local 2030 Coalition, we look forward to scaling up this work to many more cities, and I wish the coalition every success. Thank you very much.
UNICEF is very excited to be part of the Local 2030 Coalition. Congratulations on the inauguration of the new Secretariat in Bilbao, Spain. We look forward to continue working together to further this critical agenda for every child.
With the majority of people living in cities today, and this percentage only set to increase, sustainable urban development is an increasing priority. WHO will continue to support cities and national governments to improve urban health through technical support and training. We welcome additional UN coordination efforts and look forward to participate actively in the Local 2030 Coalition.
Congratulations on the opening of the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat. As local leaders, we are the one closest to our citizens in order to take global issues, such as the persistent natural disasters caused by the global warming. Let us join hands and start a movement that sets the world in motion. The city of Shizuoka continues to promote SDGs achievement through youth empowerment and partnership with the private sector. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is David Connor from 2030 Hub in Liverpool. Local 2030 creates sub-national relevance and ownership that supports but can also inspire civic leadership into coherent action. For 6 years, we've experienced what is possible and learned many lessons. We've delivered political commitments, mapping projects, 2 separate data platforms for the City of Liverpool and the Borough of St Helens, in addition to many individual private and public sector contributions. I'm excited to offer Liverpool's friendship and support to Bilbao for their commitment to SDG localization.
Aloha and congratulations on the opening of the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat. As the Local 2030 Global Thematic Hub for Islands, Hawaii Green Growth champions island leadership, innovation, and solutions for achieving Agenda 2030, rooted in Hawaii's culture of sustainability. Hawaii Green Growth also serves as the co-secretariat for the Local 2030 Islands Network. We are honored to strengthen our commitment to the localization of the SDGs alongside the Local 2030 Coalition. Mahalo.
Okay, well, now we were going to give the floor to Emilia Saith, who's the Secretary General of United Cities and Local Governments. He was here to represent the Local 2030 coalition, but I'm afraid that she had a Halloween evening. Those of you that have landed at Bilbao airport when it's windy, you know what it's like. Her plane couldn't make it. She's all right, fortunately, but she didn't make it on time. So it's going to be Pablo Fernandez who's going to speak on her behalf, and he's the cabinet head. So go ahead, please, Pablo.
Gracias. Sí, efectivamente, Emilia no.
Well, yes, thank you very much. I'm afraid that Emilia couldn't land, and she has apologized and says hello to everybody. Hello to the Lendakari.
Executive Director of UN Habitat, dear Maimouna Mod Sharif, Assistant Secretary General for UNDP, State Secretaries, all protocols observed. As it was said before, I'm speaking here on behalf of the UCLG Secretary General, Emilia Saiz. She would like to thank the coalition for inviting UCLG as a member of the steering committee of Local 2030, representing the local and regional governments constituency through the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments, to the opening of this beautiful office in the city of Bilbao. No better place to represent the localization movement than Bilbao, and the multi-level governance to make it happen. As the minister referred before, this is a true example of the Seville commitment of 2018. In these challenging times of overlapping crisis, we are here because the 2030 agenda, universal and ambitious, is still a great hope. It shows that we have understood our interdependence, from the north to the global south, from the east and from the west, from big and small levels and spheres of government. SDGs remain our universal roadmap. The task is too large for any single level of government or any single stakeholder to fulfill alone. As the closest level of government to our citizens, cities and local governments are committed to leave no one and no place behind, and call for national governments and to the international community not to leave local governments and territorial cohesion behind. Please listen to cities. At UCLG, our constituency is just returning from its World Summit of Local and Regional Leaders in Daejeon in South Korea that saw the adoption of our Pact for the Future, a pact for people, a pact for planet, and a pact for government. Ahead of this SDG summit, improving governance at all levels, promoting the renewal of the financial system in a way that allows local and regional governments to access their resources they need, and promoting innovative, fairer and more peaceful societies are the key vectors of change that we have identified and work towards achieving an effective localization process. It is true that global agendas have an effect on cities, which is why local and regional governments from around the world strive to link the local and global spheres. But it is because of this precise reason that our governments are determined to have a voice on how the local and global agendas and the renewed social contract are shaped. Transformation will imply going beyond the simple adaptations of the global goals to the local and the regional level. Localization is the political will of co-creating with our communities and to define that the aspirations are local and that the local level can give a voice for the global challenges. UCLG stands committed to supporting this coalition on behalf of the whole local government constituency and supporting its work in ensuring that local action from all actors and sectors supports the achievement of the global goals and vice versa. On the occasion of the Summit of the Future, the renewed involvement of local and regional governments in the multilateral system represents a unique opportunity to put in motion in the United Nations a true local global movement. The international system already counts with a self-organized platform to represent the constituency of cities, local and regional governments. And we welcome Local 2030 as members of the steering committee to facilitate all local actors and its diversity in this renewed, networked and inclusive multilateral system. We encourage a positive transformation of the United Nations with a full involvement of all stakeholders at local, regional, national and global level. Business as usual is not an option. We need to ensure that global agendas are understood as one. Excellencies, again, on behalf of Emilia Saiz, Secretary General of UCLG, We thank you for the warm welcome in this office, and we wish you a good start. You can count with us. Thank you.
And before we finish this meeting, I would like to present Mr. Haolian Xu, Assistant Secretary General, Assistant Administrator and Director of the Bureau for Policy and Program Support of the United Nations. Mr. Xu.
Thank you very much, everyone. I must apologize that I don't speak Spanish, and I also don't speak Euskara. So I have to speak English. And before I forget, I want to really appreciate the interpretation of the interpreters. This is, I think, one of the best interpretations I've had, really outstanding. And they not only translate the meanings, but also the feelings of the speakers. So thank you very much. Yeah. And Mr. President of the Basque country, the mayor of Bilbao, and state secretaries from the Spanish government, and secretary generals from the Basque country government, and Maimuna, and UN Under Secretary General, and UN Executive Director of the UN Habitat, and dear colleagues. And I have prepared a speech, and I'm not going to use it. And I have just made a number of points. So that's a problem, because I maybe speak longer than if I had a note, okay? So, but I just want to make a few points, really. Thank you very much. So first, I want to thank the government of Bilbao, the government of the Basque country, and the government of Spain, and also the BBK Foundation, right, for making this happen. Right? And the Bilbao is an example of the local actions for transformation, as the mayor has pointed out. Right? And it is only fitting that the Secretariat of the Local 2030 agenda is based in Bilbao. So congratulations, and thank you very much. And now UNDP is here because UNDP is a co-chair with the UN Habitat of the Local 2030 Coalition Steering Committee. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of UNDP Administrator Akin Steiner. And we want to commit, to show our commitment to our support to the localization agenda. And we're co-chair for this year and the next year, but I can say for sure that whether we're co-chair or not, we'll continue to work with the Habitat, work with our UN agencies and other partners to support the challenge, the collective efforts to deal with the challenges. And many colleagues have mentioned the multiple crises that we're facing. COVID-19 is still affecting a lot of countries in the developing world. Right? We have cost of living crisis that was mentioned. We have also a looming debt crisis with more than 50 developing countries in debt stress. That means that they are in danger of defaulting. Right? And we also have a climate emergency. Right? UNEP just issued an emissions gap report a few days ago. It shows that the 1.5 degree limit to temperature increase is extremely elusive. And the estimates is that even when we implement all existing commitments, the temperature rise will likely be more than 2 degrees. Right? So we have an emergency, climate emergency, and the global climate agenda is on life support as we now go into COP27. Right? So this just shows the multitude of challenges that we're all facing at all levels. Right? And as colleagues have said, we must act. Right? In a divided world, the SDGs, the Agenda 2030, remain the North Star of our development effort. Right? The SDG agenda transcends national boundaries and ideological differences. Right? It is an international agenda agreed by all. And for this agenda to be achieved, which is off track now, So we need to work together. And the global goals cannot be achieved if they're not achieved at local level, as many former previous speakers said. And more importantly, 110 of the 169 SDG targets require local action. Right? So it just shows that we cannot achieve SDGs if we don't act at the local level. Right? So there are significant challenges, but there are also good news. Right? We have the example of Bilbao, right, which is the inspiration to localization of the SDGs. Right? And Secretary General Fernandez just mentioned the 5 infrastructures, right, that are necessary, and I fully agree with you. Right? We have many examples from other cities in the world, right, that have shown commitment and actions. And we have other tools, many other tools with which we can use, right, to encourage participatory, inclusive, resilient, sustainable development at local levels. In terms of measurement of success, there's a movement now to go beyond the GDP. Right? The single-minded pursuit of GDP, we know, it will lead us to a dead end. Right? So there are increasing use of multidimensional poverty indexes at the national level and the local level, and that can measure progress in a fairly quick way. UNDP has also developed the Planetary Pressure-Adjusted Human Development Index, right, that takes into account the footprint of material usage and the carbon emissions when measuring the level of development. Right? And also we have other tools. Colleagues mentioned the voluntary local reviews. Right? There's a movement of voluntary local reviews, which serves as a tool to engage citizens to set targets, monitor progress, and report on results. So there are increasingly diverse tools. We talked about the financing earlier. On financing, there are also a lot of tools. There are funds, the money is there, right? They're not in the hands of governments, not all in the hands of governments. The question that we needed to use these tools to align investment to make them SDG positive, right? The nature positive. The question of a lot is alignment of existing financing, right? So they support SDGs. So there are a lot of, so this is good news, right? And I just want to mention one case, and I will finish, I promise. Today I had a lunch with a well-known local figure, Danny Laza, right? I understand he's a well-known chef, Michelin chef, 1 hour drive from here. I had lunch with him today and with Gorka Espio, who probably is here in the audience, right? In the museum, of the Guggenheim Museum, right? We didn't go to the restaurant. We went to the bistro, okay, right? But the topic of the discussion, right, is how we can use gastronomy, right, as a tool to drive systems change, and using portfolios approach to encourage transformation. Because food is the entry point that touches on agriculture, local economies, the supply chain systems, the circular economies, and the social cohesion, and so much more. Right? So I think we have a lot of examples. So I will skip some other points, and just to say that really we have a lot of examples. Bilbao has a lot to offer. The Basque country has a lot to offer, and Spain has a lot to offer. So let's go from Bilbao to global, and let's localize SDGs and achieve SDGs together. Thank you very much.
And finally, I give the floor to Mrs. Maimouna Mosharif, Vice President and Executive Director of the United Nations Human Settlements Program of UN Habitat. Please, welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think it's good to be given as a last speaker because I'm chairing the Local 20 coalition, and also my co-chair is a second last because they asked the chair to listen to everybody before you can even chair the Local 2030. So thank you so much, Excellencies, distinguished guests, representative, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure, actually, to be here for the opening of the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat in Bilbao. I've been eyeing to come to Bilbao, and I just want to share you a bit of a story. Yeah, it won't be long. I know about Bilbao in 2016 when I was in Singapore as a panel for the Lee Kuan Yew Award, and Bilbao submitted for the Lee Kuan Yew Award, and Bilbao won the award at that time. So I was thinking, one day I need to be in Bilbao. But 6 years later, today I'm here. So thank you so much for this holding this secretariat. So today is a very true milestone in the life of the revamped the Local 20 Coalition, which we launched a year ago, actually, and at the UN General Assembly in September 2021. Allow me to begin by expressing my gratitude to Excellency Mr. Jose Manuel Alvarez, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the European Union and Cooperation of the Kingdom of Spain, Mr. Inigo Urkulu, President of Basque Country, Mr. Juan Mari Arbuto, I hope that I pronounced your name. Oh, no, I don't know to speak Spanish, same as my colleague, Mayor of Bilbao, Mr. Xavier Segredo, President of BBK, and you have made this day possible through the outstanding whole of government and whole of society proposal that Spain put forward to support the localization of the SDG. And we deeply appreciate your commitment to sustainable development and multi-level governance at home, combined with global solidarity with those who need it abroad. And let me also take a moment to thank the champion of the Local 2030 Coalition and a major driving force behind its creation, Madam Amina Mohammed, our Deputy Secretary General of United Nations and Chair of the United Nations Sustainable Development Group. We are grateful for her vision and her immense support to this UN system-wide initiative. I also would like to thank our sister agency and co-chair, UNDP, represented here by Mr. Hao Liang, UN Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Assistant Administrator, and we are happy to work side by side with you to harness the power of local action for global impact. And it's so nice to hear that even though after the 2 years, you will also continue working with us. I cannot fail to mention the member of the Local 2030 Steering Committee that you've seen their message, who have either joined us in person or sent messages today. Yvonne Akisoya, the Mayor of Freetown. Miss Emilia Sais is also Secretary of UCLG, the message given by our colleague here. Miss Clara Arpa Azofra, CEO of Arpa Group, you listened to her just now. Miss Esther Moiruri, founder of the Global Ribbon Initiative, you heard about her youth aspiration, and all women steering committee is the powerhouse driving the coalition forward. I think it's look at have a clap, isn't it? So that you won't be. And a big thank you to all the UN agencies, officers, fund and program that support the coalition and the Local 20 Hub. And I was delighted to watch just now such important messages of commitments towards our collective enterprise. This sends a strong signal that the Local 2030 Coalition is truly an inclusive and global initiative. This is my dream come true. I was a former mayor in Penang. Localization of SDG is the thing that I always put forward when I was a mayor. And I was also active in the UCLG aspect. And now I am on the other side of it. My colleagues in the UCLG and the mayors look at me and say, Maimuna, you better walk your talk. You were with us before, but now you are on the other side. You better work together with us. So I think today is the day and the dream comes true. So dear colleagues, and it's also fall on the same day as the World Cities Day, where we talk about act local to go global. And we realized that in 2016, when I attended a conference in Seoul, I put up to say that, we used to say that think local, act global, or something like that, you know. And then I said that I think that is not enough. Or you have think local, think global, act local. Yeah, think global, act local. Yeah, that's the one. Then I flip it up. I said that I think I don't agree with think global, act local. I think we have to act local. We have to understand the challenges. I heard that from the panelists. I'm so happy. We have to know the challenges. We have to know what are working and what are not working in our cities. Then you go to the global and look for the solution, or even bring the global to bring to the city to look for the solution. Once you go to the global, don't forget to come back to local and act local. So today I can see that act local to go global. Then it's giving a strong message when I said that in 2016 in Seoul. So this is send a strong message that without accelerating localization effort in cities and communities, we will not be able to deliver on the SDGs in the remaining 8 years of decade of action. We have only 2,560 days to 2030. You calculate by 24 hours a day. Minus 8 days, maybe we are doing our own thing. So how much time that we need? So I think the time is to act is now. So localization as a principle underpinned in the new urban agenda, which is the accelerator, the how framework for SDG. This is also why SDG localization is one of my 3 key priorities in the immediate future, aiming to drive the fundamental shift that city needs. I personally believe, not because I'm an urban planner, not because I'm a mayor, I personally believe that SDG localization is also key to achieving the ambition of inclusive multilateralism that the Secretary General has articulated in his report, Our Common Agenda, last year. So I also would like to reiterate here that SDG localization is integrally linked to stronger multi-level governance. We hear that just now during the panel and also in the speeches and the messages. It is the way to build communication between various spheres of government and coherence between policies, regulation, plans, and action at different scale in the pursuit of common objective. That's why UN Habitat approach to SDG localization include interlinked pillars of support to the voluntary local review, advancing the urban monitoring framework, scaling this with financing through our SDG Cities flagship initiative. So the Local20 Coalition, which we have the privilege and responsibility to co-chair and serve as a secretariat for, has now become an important 4th pillar of this approach. So through Local2030 Coalition, we want to promote coherence. We want to promote integrated action across UN system. And we can respond more effectively to the needs of priorities of the local actors. With the launch of this SDG localization window of the joint SDG fund next year with initial funding from Spain, thank you so much. We hope to identify and support catalytic local actions and ultimately enhance local access to the real financing needed to achieve the 2030 agenda. This is because 64% of the SDG target out of 169 have to be implemented in cities. And our DSG used to say that the SDG will be won a loss in cities. So that is how important cities are. So the push towards localization started with Agenda 21, evolved with the Millennium Development Goal, and become a real driving force to achieve 2030 SDG. So this is very, very important for us, and on the road for the 2030 and the post-2030, let me highlight 4 important and immediate moments that will provide prominent opportunities to advance the work of Local 2030 Coalition. First, UN Habitat Assembly, coming up in June 2023. And the second is the World Urban Forum 12 in 2024. And I hope you will bring knowledge and expertise, experience to this fora. Then the SG mentioned just now, SDG Summit in September 2023. At the same time, Summit of the Future in 2024. So you see the roadmap is already there. I'm talking to myself because chairing the Secretariat. But with all of your collaboration, your partnership, I think we can bring something at least to the UN Habitat Assembly, SDG Summit, and the World Urban Forum, and for the Summit of the Future in 2024. Last but not least, the ideal starting point to make localization central will be in the 2024 Summit for the Future. I'm also the chair of the Task Force for the Future Cities. So please help me. What future that we need? And the young people at the back, so what future that we need so that we can work together through Local 2030 Coalition. Again, thank you very much for being here with your vision, your action, your commitment, and opening the Secretariat here in Bilbao is with the future holds. We will continue working with the Spanish partners, building a bigger, stronger network of champions in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. So I would like to say thank you to the government of Spain, to the mayor, to the president of the Basque government, to all of you, and also to the interpreter. Thank you so much. The interpreter, thank you so much. And to all my team who make this thing happen. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Maimouna Mosharif. Da gusto escuchar a alguien que se cree.
Well, it's wonderful to listen to somebody that really believes in what she's saying. Okay, well, let's close, and now it's true. We are going to be finished, okay? And even if you don't believe it, we're going to be finished on time according to the program, so I've lost a bet. And I thought it was as difficult as achieving the 2030 goals. But as has just been pointed out, and for the year 2030, there are only 7 years to go. And in such a complex world, like this world we're dealing with, it's a very little time. Although I think that tonight, what has been very clear, that if you want, we will be able to achieve these goals set by the United Nations by networking and by learning from other people. I'm sure that we will be able to achieve that. And therefore, this Secretariat will start working on this from now onwards. Well, thank you very much for your hard work and many thanks for participating in this project. Many thanks to everybody. So thank you and very good luck to all of you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.